My name is Sara Brownell, and I'm a professor at Arizona State University. I'm a biology education researcher, and my research now focuses on how we can make undergraduate science learning environments more inclusive. However, I've completed my PhD in neuroimmunology before transitioning to be a biology education researcher. I have over 140 publications, and I can actually recall back to kind of my first publication and what a big deal that was. So I'm really proud of a lot of the work that I've done and that it's resulted in publications that folks can read and build on. I'm a fellow of the American Association for the Advancement in Science, or AAAS. But really what I'm most proud of is I was awarded the LGBTQ plus Educator of the Year award from a national organization. And for me, I was personally closeted in college, professionally closeted in grad school. And so it's really amazing to see how full circle things have come as I now stand up in front of my 300-person class and reveal my LGBTQ identity, and now even do research on the experiences of LGBTQ plus folks revealing their identities in class. One of the challenges I faced in grad school actually relates to my qualifying exams. So these are often kind of the big milestone at the middle of people's PhDs where that advances them to PhD candidacy. And my grad school experience was a bit unique in the sense that I actually went to two different institutions. I started graduate school, my PhD, at the Scripps Research Institute, and I spent 3 years there. But ended up getting a master's. And then I transferred to Stanford, where I actually spent another 4 years and actually received my PhD there. Part of the joy and the challenge of attending two distinct graduate programs was I had the opportunity to take two distinct qualifying exams at both places. And at both places, they were actually really hard. So in my first qualifying exam, I actually didn't pass. I went in thinking that I was gonna do great. I had done a ton of prep work, and I just wasn't prepared for the level of questions that they were asking. And so I had to go back and redo it there. And I learned a ton from redoing it, and I would argue it made me a better scientist, but it became a kind of a situation where I wasn't proud of the fact that I didn't pass my qualifying exam the first time. I definitely didn't advertise it. I think this is actually the first time I'm sharing it with, not a super close group of people. And then when I was at my second institution, I had to go through a qualifying exam yet again. And I was super, super nervous, right? Because I was so worried that even though I was preparing a lot for it, I was really, really worried that maybe I wouldn't pass this time again. And I ended up getting so nervous that I started actually getting these panic attacks. But at the time, I didn't know that they were panic attacks. I thought maybe I was having a heart attack. Went to the campus health center and they were like, all right, this is a panic attack. And I was like, I don't get panic attacks. And they were like, all right, do you have anything stressful coming up? And I was like, well, maybe this qualifying exam. And I kept having them actually until the actual exam. So I, at that point in life, hadn't kind of figured out how to kind of control my stress and panic about that. And then when I ended up actually taking my qualifying exam, I'd like to be able to tell you that it was smooth sailing and wasn't an issue at all, but actually it was really challenging and hard too. And I ended up actually spending 40 minutes on slide number 3, right? So slide 1 was my title, slide 2 was some kind of introduction, and slide 3 was still pretty much an introduction. It was really that I was going to use this particular mouse model to study this human disease that I was interested in. And my committee members basically asked me why. Why do I use that particular mouse model? And honestly, I didn't know. The real answer is I used it because every other person in my lab used this mouse model. And I just didn't think about the pros and cons of the model, how it mimicked the human disease, what other alternative models were. All of these were questions that I was asked in that 40 minutes. And so it was just a really uncomfortable 40 minutes of saying, I don't know. And at that moment, I felt really bad about myself. And even though I proceeded onward and ended up actually doing the rest of the presentation, and I knew so much nitty gritty information about all these complicated molecular pathways that of course I don't remember at this point, right? But at that point I knew all of it. And it was clear to my committee that I had prepared and I did have a really solid understanding of what my research questions were. I left that meeting just feeling like a failure. And so I passed. I officially passed. I didn't have to redo anything, but I didn't feel like it was a good job, and it didn't feel like what I wanted it to actually be. And I realized how important the questions were that my committee members were asking. I think that that was actually part of why I felt like such a failure, that it was such a foundational question. How did I not think about that beforehand, right? And I felt so stupid for just not knowing the answers. Super uncomfortable, painful, got emotionally upset, went home and cried, right? All the like, you know, typical responses that you might imagine. My advisor played a huge part in helping me cope. And, you know, I don't actually know if he even knows this. I'm not sure if I shared with him how important he was in that moment. So we left and we walked back to our research lab after the meeting. And he was so upset at how the committee members had treated me and how they had just like kind of attacked and attacked and attacked and beat me down on that one slide, when it was so clear after the first question that I just didn't know, right? And it felt super comforting that it felt like he was on my team. It was like he felt also attacked. And that was just, to not feel alone, to not have him reiterate why I didn't know the answer and why, you know, that was embarrassing to him. He didn't do any of that, right? He instead emotionally was indicated he was upset, right, at how that had gone down. And it was just like 100% support. There was no indication that he didn't think that I should have passed, that he was embarrassed. And that was incredible. And he ended up, right, we walked back to the lab, we kind of talked about it. I went back home, I cried. He ended up actually sending me an email later that night, just checking in. And that wasn't really the relationship that we had. So that was a little unique. And it just meant a lot, right, for him to do that. And then actually later that night, another committee member reached out to me and checked in. And I had TA'd 2 courses with this committee member. So I had more of kind of a personal relationship with him just because of, you know, interacting with teaching. And he acknowledged that it was one of the most brutal exams that they had seen in a very long career, and that he thought that I had actually done really well despite how rocky it started off, and hoped that I was doing okay. And that also, you know, from this really famous, fancy professor, taking the time to send me that quick email and reiterating that that was much like harder than most exams and that I did okay, even though he realized that I probably didn't feel like I was doing okay. It felt amazing to have him check in on me. So in both cases, the committee members who I'd had a more personal relationship with, because of those sustained interactions, my advisor, as well as the person I TA'd for, really helped me. The people who were just committee members that I saw once a year, right? They didn't reach out, they didn't check in. And so if it wasn't for those personal relationships, I think I would be remembering my qualifying exam in a very different way at this point. So my qualifying exam actually ended up being absolutely transformative for me, because I realized in real time during those 40 minutes on slide 3 that I needed to take a bigger picture approach to my research, right? Like, I started thinking about my audience when I was presenting my work far more so than I had previously thought about it. Previously, I was thinking about presenting at lab meeting with everyone being an expert in this area, right? And thinking about all the nitty-gritty details, but thinking about it to a slightly broader audience. Why should they care? Why does this model matter, right? What are some of the big picture challenges? I want to remind current grad students that negative experiences can be really motivating and can be transformational to who they are as scientists and mentors and teachers, etc., as long as you don't take the experience personally, right? And as long as you don't generalize from that experience and say, because I made this one mistake, I'm bad at science, right? Or because I didn't do this one thing correctly, I should drop out, right? And instead look at that as, wow, I should have prepared a little bit differently in the next time I can. And I can mentor my future students so that they're better equipped to be able to answer those types of questions. right? I would say that overall, I needed to learn to have a broader understanding of the science that I was doing. I was too zoomed in, and that experience, while it was painful, really nailed that for me, and that I feel like was really helpful, and it made me better. And I hope that it's made the people that I interact with better as well. Relatedly, but slightly different and not specific to my qualifying exam, I think that science does a really good job at making us critical, right? We identify the flaws in experiments, the flaws in research design, the flaws in people's interpretations. And I've learned how to really hone that inner critic that I have, not just as far as how I'm critical of others, but also how I'm critical of myself, right? And so now what I've really tried to do, since I spent many years making myself more critical, I actually try to specifically use positive affirmations to tone down some of that inner critic, specifically as it relates to myself, right? And I think that it's super important to realize that we spend a lot of time reminding ourselves of what we can improve upon and what we can do better. And we don't necessarily spend the same amount of time reminding ourselves of what we do right, right? And where we have improved already in the past. And so doing positive affirmations, and literally I've got like sticky notes up that I'll like say out loud to myself. If I had met you in grad school, when I was in grad school, and told you that 15 years down the line I'd be doing this, I would have not believed myself. I used to make fun of people who did positive affirmations, but it has changed my worldview. It has helped me feel just better about myself and who I am, and specifically has toned down that inner critic. Well, thanks for watching Failsafe Science. My name is Sara Brownell, and I hope my story helps graduate students feel as though they can learn from hard situations with supportive mentors around them.